Have you ever watched a cartoon and wanted to explore the world it takes place in? Then join the club, my friend. This want was one that rang through my mind during my childhood countless times, being that I watched cartoons like Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Fairly OddParents, and Spongebob as much as I did. I was also an avid gamer, and it was easy to see that games inherently have a level of intimacy that cartoons don't. Because while cartoons have you watch other characters explore and discover the world they live in, games let you do that all yourself and put you in the driver's seat. If the connection isn't clear yet, I just really wanted to play as a fish and explore around Bikini Bottom to my heart's content, and I knew games could get me there. I mean, come on. Games based on beloved cartoons and other animated series? What could go wrong? Oh, I guess that could go wrong. Although licensed games oftentimes get a bad rep, there are definitely some classics out there. But no cartoon franchise has better licensed games than SpongeBob. You've got Creature from the Krusty Krab, the SpongeBob movie game, Revenge of the Flying Dutchman, Battle for Bikini Bottom, the list goes on. But there's one other SpongeBob game that not a lot of people talk about these days. This is a game that lets you interact with the SpongeBob universe with a certain level of customization and creativity that's unlike any other SpongeBob game out there. I'm Tomshark, and today I'll be talking about Drawn to Life Spongebob Squarepants Edition for the Nintendo DS. Let's begin. Funny story. Earlier I said that not a lot of people talk about this game nowadays, but I actually managed to forget about it too. I was searching my closet for a game to talk about, and then I remembered this little gem just waiting on my shelf, beckoning me to talk about it. So I took my opportunity. Drawn to Life SpongeBob Edition is a 2D platformer about the second coming of Doodle Bob. Okay. Sorry, I needed to make sure I actually wrote that there. Carry on. The beginning of the game mirrors that of the SpongeBob episode Frankendoodle, which starts with an artist drawing something out on a boat, until he drops his pencil into the water. Sooner than later, the seemingly enormous writing utensil falls within reach of SpongeBob and Patrick, and when I say fall, I mean that quite literally. Unknowing of the dangers that come with their new find, SpongeBob and Patrick use the pencil to create funny drawings that come to life. Then, Doodle Bob is born. SpongeBob and Patrick created him to mess around with Squidward, but before they knew it, he was off on his own running amok and causing trouble. After countless shenanigans and borderline home invasion, SpongeBob puts Doodle Bob on a page, ending his tirade. Drawn to Life SpongeBob Edition starts the same way, but this time the artist has two pencils, and to everyone's surprise, events quickly repeat themselves and he drops both of them. Maybe this guy is a plot device. Once the pencils reach the ocean floor, in a similar manner to the pencil in the show, Patrick gets his grubby little mitts on one of them, and we all know where this is going. Doodle Bob, now resurrected, takes one of the pencils and goes to wreak havoc across Bikini Bottom. Then SpongeBob shows up and realizes how badly Patrick messed up, and their bit-crushed screams are absolutely priceless. Remembering the other pencil, SpongeBob proposes that they use it to create a hero to combat Doodle Bob. This is where you come in.
Quiet on the set!
The main hero's name is Doodle Pants, and you get to draw him. And here he is, what a thing of beauty. After Doodle Pants comes to fruition, you enter the tutorial level and learn your core controls. You move around, jump with B, ground pound by holding down while in the air, punch with Y, use special character moves with X, complete different actions with the touchscreen, and of course draw, but that's only at certain points. There are some power-ups which can enhance your abilities within levels as well, but trust me, I'll get to those later. The end of the tutorial brings you to the Bikini Bottom hub world where you are first tasked with drawing out your house. I went for a nice bamboo roof look, nothing too fancy. Outside your house in the hub, you can interact with NPCs, draw things for them and yourself, and buy lives and other collectibles from the Krusty Krab. Walking around Bikini Bottom is when I felt the game was most authentic. Getting to interact with different SpongeBob characters, even down to normal civilians, made me feel like I was a part of the world and had a real reason for being there. Well, I mean, you play as the hero character everyone relies on, so you kind of have to be there. But nonetheless, interactions still feel pretty organic and true to SpongeBob, which I still can't deny after having played it over again for this video. And that feeling really drew me in and held me close. When I thought about experiencing SpongeBob in video game form as a kid, I imagined something more akin to Battle for Bikini Bottom, a game with good graphics and full 3D environments and movement. Not a 2D platformer with muddy graphics. And the 2D platformer part isn't what I'm trying to focus on here. 2D platformers can be just as great as 3D. What I'm trying to rag on here the most is the graphics. I'm not even gonna go in depth on the visuals here because if it wasn't clear already, the graphics didn't age well. It almost looks like a pixelated Van Gogh painting at all times. But despite the game's watered down graphics, get it, that's a water pun, I'm still all about this game. And that should serve as a testament to how fun of a game this actually is. Just goes to show you, gameplay will always be above graphics. I think another reason for the game's unexpected authenticity are the things I've been passively mentioning throughout the video so far, all of the drawings. The drawings you make add an even greater level of depth onto the game's world-building aspects like NPC dialogue and the Bikini Bottom hub world because, with them, you're not just having true-to-show interactions with NPCs and existing in the world anymore. You're actually inputting your own creativity into the game, which I have to give the game major props for. So, while we're already on the horse, let's talk about how the drawing works. You're prompted to draw something either by an NPC at a canvas next to the outlines of what you're gonna draw, or when you kill an enemy you can replace with a drawing. What you're drawing can vary from bouncy shoes to a spinning gear platform to even a car that you can drive around the Bikini Bottom hub for faster movement. And you can design everything in any way you want. Literally any way. You could fill the whole game with Marvel heroes and make yourself Thanos and nothing would stop you. And for posterity, every drawing you make in the game can be found in the collection book in your house. When you start a drawing, you're brought to this canvas setup. The top screen displays how your drawing will look in the real levels on an art gallery-esque background, and on the bottom screen is where you do the actual drawing. Your main tools for creation are quite basic, but serve their purpose. You have a multitude of colors, along with additional color sets you can buy from the Krusty Krab later in the game, different brush sizes, a fill bucket, an eraser, a zoom in / zoom out button, and an absolutely useless undo button. It's one of those one fix only undo buttons, so you can't undo multiple of your previous actions. However, that's not nearly as offensive as the blue lines on the edge of your drawing space. They're clearly there to act as the edge of your drawing, but what's the point of that if you can draw underneath them? There were innumerable times when I drew something that looked great on the bottom screen, but looked all scraggly and gross on the top because of this. Realistically, it's not that bad, but it's just annoying to have to correct this every time you create something. As a total package, making your creations is quite cumbersome. Being that the bottom screen is so small, even on a DSi XL or a 3DS XL, it's hard to be accurate with each stroke of the stylus. Precision is your best friend, so unless you have the steadiest hand on planet Earth, you're gonna make something that looks pretty shaky. Using the zoom tools can give you a much needed boost of precision, but even with that, it's still hard to be precise. You have to put in a lot of extra time to make your stuff look good, and even if you put loads of detail into your creations, there's no guarantee that they won't look indescribable in the actual game. I started this game thinking, it's not gonna be like when I was a kid. I'll be a drawing master! And that dream slowly dwindled once I hit the halfway point, with a few exceptions of course. Always gotta make that spaceship in the late game look dang good. Despite all of my nitpicks, drawing things in this game is still entertaining. And if you're not a great artist, then drawing very simple things for each prompt is still pretty fun as well. I actually recommend that over anything else, because making goofy, somewhat low-effort drawings goes along surprisingly well with the game's overall vibe. However, if you want to draw everything out with detail, just be prepared to multiply the game's normal runtime by at least 3 for your playthrough. Although I'm sure your game would probably look a lot better than mine past the second half. I'll give you that. All of this aside, my biggest complaint with the drawings is that there's simply way too many of them to do. There's tons in each level, there's boatloads in the hub world, get it cause boats go on the ocean, never mind, and sometimes it feels like every step you take there's an art pad for you to make something on. In the hub it's fine because it provides you with more items for your house and the like, but in the levels it could have been completely avoided. This is a problem that's much more prevalent in the early to mid game, because once you reach the end, most of everything you need to make is already made, and I understand that the game is like this for variety's sake, but my point still stands. As I said earlier, the drawings you make add a whole new level of meaning to your place in the game's world, no matter their quality, and the game wouldn't be the same without them. Moving on a bit, the remainder of the story manages to stay well within the boundaries of the Spongebob universe while still making some of its own decisions. Continued from the intro, the plot can be summed up into Doodle Bob is reborn, captures a bunch of people, and covers the world and his minions. And you gotta stop him. On paper, it sounds generic and boring and uninteresting at best, but in execution, it's just what the doctor ordered and works well with a SpongeBob game. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't simple as toast, but it's fitting. And its presentation is, well, simply wondrous. The first thing you see in the game is a poorly rendered 3D cutscene of Spongebob, Patrick, and Doodle Bob. Let's put it that way. For the rest of the game, at least until the end, you get simple stills of each character with subtitles talking back and forth with different facial expressions, and I love how overdramatic they are. Nearly every scene made me laugh, and I mean, how can you not laugh when Squidward goes from his normal sarcastic self to full-on stoner mode? And then there's this one still of Patrick that I'm sorry, I just... And you can even come across world-specific characters like the Flying Dutchman. These little sequences are present in between levels, before bosses, and any other time that the story has a beat. Speaking of worlds, I initially thought that they strayed away from the SpongeBob source material and did their own thing, but I was surprised to be reminded of how much they stay within the realm of the show. The game has a total of 5 worlds, the 5th being after you beat the game. Each world contains around 4 levels and 1 boss level, and describing what you do in them is much like describing the game's core controls. You run around 2D environments, jumping around, fighting different enemies, collecting different things, and drawing things when you need to. Each level is a linear straight shot with smaller break-off points that oftentimes meet back at a more central path. For example, think of the Mario Brothers and how there are levels with cave bits off the normal level path. Except in this game, there's nothing separating the two. You transition seamlessly. In each level, there are checkpoint markers spread throughout to act as, well, checkpoints. Every time you die, you get taken back to the last checkpoint you passed, but if you fall in a hole, you go back to the checkpoint anyway, even if you have health left over. This definitely pissed me off in a couple instances involving slippery small ledges and lots of pits. And this occurs across all of the different worlds with varying frequency. The different trails branching around each level lead you to various collectibles such as coins, all of the doodles you have to erase, and all of the captured civilians. You get coins to buy things from the Krusty Krab, you clean up all the doodles for no apparent reason, and you free the civilians so they'll go back to Bikini Bottom where they'll prompt you to draw things. Coins are found throughout each level and are very sparingly distributed. The doodles are slightly more difficult to locate in some of the more mazy levels, but they're not impossible to find in the slightest. The captured civilians are the most challenging thing to find. In levels with less deviation in their different paths, they're easy to locate and often fall right on the central path. But in big, sprawling levels, it feels impossible to find any of them without backtracking a bit. And yet again, every NPC you save grants you another drawing in the hub. Most of the NPC prompted objects are pieces of furniture and household effects, but occasionally you get to make things along the lines of your own car and your own pet. Alongside the drawings in the hub and all of the canvas ones, you also get to create new forms for certain enemies. Every foe is either a normal enemy or a doodle one. You can kill the normal enemies by attacking them directly, but you can only kill the doodle enemies once you've beaten them down and swiped across the touchscreen to transform them into your own creation. Redesigning enemies into more docile forms is really fun, especially once you see them in the actual levels. And as you can see, my level of effort with them got lower and lower the further I went. Also, it's good to note that doodle enemies keep respawning if you don't clean up the doodles around them. Each level contains plenty of power-ups too, which you also get to draw. You've got bouncy shoes, a hard hat, a wing cap, spiky cleats, a jellyfishing net that I made the furthest thing from a jellyfishing net, and then there's the karate glove, which I got really creative with. I guess you could say I went infinity and beyond with it.
The end is near.
Most of these items are either combat-centric or make traversal more easy, but then there's the stupid ninja suit that has no application I can identify. I'd say it's about as useless as I made it look. But hey, you can't go wrong with the simple ski mask, am I right? And of course, all of the power-ups are created and unlocked gradually. Along with pickups, you also have a small assortment of character-based abilities you can equip in the hub. You've got 3 options: Spongebob, Squidward, and Patrick. Equipping Spongebob gives you a shield you draw around yourself, Squidward lets you draw a circle around your foes to stun them, and Patrick has you draw a line that sends him twirling across the screen, stunning foes in his path. I pretty much only used Patrick's spin move throughout the whole game, and it was never really that effective. If they actually did damage at all, then I'd think of them more highly, but they just worthlessly stun enemies for a second or two with no real turnout. I kinda forgot the abilities were there after a while. Besides the normal levels that contain everything previously mentioned, there are 2 other level types, the Kart Rider and Spaceship levels. The Kart Rider levels involve riding along a track while moving away obstacles and blowing through enemies, and the Spaceship levels are much like Galaga, but you get to draw your own spaceship, which I loved so much as a kid. Replaying the spaceship stages and redesigning my ship repeatedly brought me so much joy, and being that I was a kid and thus lacked all skill, these levels were genuinely hard, and I really enjoyed the challenge. And even though I whoop everything's ass now, the spaceship levels still feel really fun. Each world is made up of these oddball levels and the real ones. You start the game in Bikini Bottom, which is the title of the hub world and the first world. They could have named the first world the city or downtown or something along those lines, but whatever. That's just a small nitpick. From there on out You okay there, Eugene? This introductory world is the easiest in the game. It's simple to blow through, and it's here that you make the game's most basic items, including the karate glove. The decor is the same as the hub as well, and the world's boss is a giant doodle robot that you fight on top of a doodle outpost in the middle of Bikini Bottom. I would say that this fight is mediocre at best, but there's a way to cheese it which makes it even worse. You're supposed to jump up on these platforms to avoid his hand slam attack, jump on his head, and swipe away. But with the right trajectory, aka just normally jumping up to him, you can finish him off in under a minute. After finishing off the Iron Giant, you go to World 2, the jungle. If you're having trouble relating this to SpongeBob, just imagine the kelp forest from that one episode with the magic conch. Magic conch? Will I ever find love?
No.
This world is definitely harder than the first and acts as evidence of the game's rising difficulty, that slowly increases as player familiarity increases. The levels transition from jungle-themed to a wind level that's absolutely garbage and ends in a temple setting. Now, if you're trying to find the correlation between this and SpongeBob, you're out of luck, pal. Here's the JKL episode, that's the best I got. The boss of this world is just Doodle Bob. He just walks around and throws goop and bowling balls at you, which was a nice nod to Frankendoodle. In his last phase, he trails a bunch of smoke and or foam behind him, but besides that, it's pretty simple. You can swipe away his attacks with your axe, jellyfish net, and then you just run in and whack him with it. This is not that fun. It's too simple for my tastes, and it doesn't provide anything really interesting. I felt the same way about the World 1 boss, but I somewhat gave it a pass because it's the first boss in the game. However, this fight has no excuses. World 3 is the Deep Sea, which I assume is adjacent to Rock Bottom, and my hatred for most of World 3's levels goes even deeper than that. You start out just hanging out on the seafloor, and eventually you make your way into the Flying Dutchman's ship, and the levels are so sporadically different in quality. Level 1 is decent, level 2 is annoying as hell, level 3 is cool, and level 4 is a bit of a trash fire. A maze level that involves falling through the bottom to get to the top is cool, but it's not cool when the objects you need to progress are so finicky to use, and when the power-ups you need for full level completion are so sparsely dispersed. The boss here is Doodle Patrick, who, unlike the real Patrick, has quite the vocabulary. And surprise, surprise, he's easy too. But he's a bit more fun. In the beginning, he throws goop at you and then flamboyantly runs around his arena until you punch him into the fetal position and swipe over him enough times. Each time you do this, he increases in size and gains a new ability. The first time he grows, he gets a completely telegraphed and easily exploitable ground pound attack that stun locks you if you're on the ground. The second time he starts spinning around and bouncing across the floor, and his ground pound gets a shockwave. And the third time, his spin gains so much velocity that he starts bouncing off the ceiling. Similar to the robot boss, I don't know why these platforms are here. I'm fairly certain I went on them once at the start and never used them again. The boss just didn't need them. The fourth world is outer space. You use Sandy's rocket to get there, and she nods to the episode Sandy's Rocket where they obliterated her rocket. And how many times can I say rocket in one sentence? The space levels are pretty solid, but they don't stand out too well. I'm really only referring to the on-the-ground levels here because the spaceship levels are sick. The first one is kinda basic, but the second one leading to the final boss is amazing. Imagine a toned down Bullet Hell Galaga and you get what I'm talking about here. It has nearly all of the awesome stuff a space shooter should have, like cool power-ups, different obstacles, and fast-paced action. I've praised it once and I'll praise it again. This level is god tier. But returning to the feet on the ground levels, you start out on the lunar surface and you eventually transition to Doodle Bikini Bottom, which Doodle Bob created on the moon. Then you go through a space station level, which I hate, and the final boss begins. It starts like the normal Doodle Bob fight in the temple with a new move or two added here and there, but there's other Doodle enemies in the arena with you this time. Then, after that god tier space level I rambled on about, you face Doodle Bob for the last time. He pulls out all the stops this time around too, as he's absolutely massive and covered in doodles, and there's no canonical explanation for this. You beat him once and then he leaves to expand his body mass 6 times over with no reason as to how. I'm also very surprised that this didn't scare the crap out of me as a kid, but I guess I was a brave lad. And with this wrestler getup here, there's no chance he'll get a peep out of me. No, I take it back. You've got to swipe all the doodles off of him over multiple different phases, and sadly, he does mostly what every other boss does. He charges at you blindly, gets a ground pound attack, and summons smaller Doodle Bobs. Quick tip. If you hit him while you're on the floor, you get 2 hits in. But if you jump at the right height and hit him, you can get 4, potentially even 5 hits in. Also, the platforms actually matter in this fight, unless you want to get absolutely trampled. His defeat brings on another 3D cutscene, where Spongebob, Patrick, and Squidward realize that Doodle Bob did all of this just because he wanted friends. So, you erase his face and give him a happy one, and everyone lived happily ever after. But, the game's not over yet. After beating the game, and only after beating the game, you can access the secret 5th world, Notebook Land. This place is one of the game's most solid segments by a long shot, even though it's criminally short. It's themed after a notebook and has tons of binder paper and little doodles all over the place. You've got only 2 levels this time around, the latter one being the secret boss, and the first one being a gauntlet that will test every ounce of skill you have with this game. This singular level has parts where the level changes perspective, where there's countless spikes and underwater mines, a section with jellyfish slippery ground and plenty of pits in between, one with giant lasers, and then the final stretch. You have to slide around on slippery ground with spikes at certain intervals, which doesn't sound that bad. But then you have to take into account the giant laser shooting down the hall that you have to duck to avoid. So not only are you trying to progress, you're also trying to stay as close to the floor as possible as to not get instantly clotheslined a mile backwards. The entirety of the game builds the player up for this one bum rush of challenges. It's as if the game's sense of progression comes to a climax at this point. However, with a little determination and a little time, you can do it. And so did I. And you are rewarded with the secret boss. This thing. This is another nod to Frankendoodle, being that this is the bootleg Squidward drawing SpongeBob and Patrick made. This is the simplest and easiest boss, period. He kinda scurries around and you gotta do what you've done before, stomp, swipe, repeat. But when you swipe over him, he splits up into smaller versions of himself. Eventually, you'll have 8 little Squidwards scurrying around the arena. Bring the tiny little bastards down and the fight's over. This boss is lackluster in hindsight, but I had fun with it, especially after this little trip through hell. The final thing I want to talk about is the music, cause it's all as SpongeBob-y as possible. And no, that is not a word. Each track is fitting for their respective worlds and levels, and they're all original, except the title screen music, which is a rendition of the SpongeBob opening. The only big issue I have with the music is that each track is slightly overplayed. The music is great in moderation, but there isn't enough variety in it between levels. My favorite tracks are the drawing theme and the loading screen theme, which is wildly cut short because the game loads too dang fast. I've heard the first 3 seconds of that track more times than I have the entire thing. Come on, man! And being that I missed this game so much after having been reminded of it, hearing only the smallest portion of this track made it even worse. I gotta say, after having replayed this game and after having reviewed it, my thoughts on this game are still very much the same. I loved it when I was a kid and I still love it now, and that's including all of the clunkiness, the jank, and the crappy levels. A lot of this comes from the hardware and a lot of it comes from the game itself, but I'll always hold it close because it placed me into a world I always wanted to explore and gave me plenty of tools to be creative within that world. Playing through Drawn to Life SpongeBob Edition is like playing through a wacky SpongeBob movie, and no rose-colored reminiscences or nostalgia-driven fondness could affect that experience. If you're willing to bear with this game's flaws, then I'd say give it a whirl. Any SpongeBob fans, artists, or a mix of both will most likely really enjoy this game. But if you have no connection to SpongeBob at all and don't enjoy drawing, even drawing simple things, then I'd give this a pass. If you actually want to look into this, it's listed for varied prices online. I've seen it range from 99 cents on eBay to $70 on Amazon. But if I had to give Drawn to Life SpongeBob Squarepants Edition a price that I feel represents its quality and age, I'd say it's worth $5 at least and $15 at max. I'm Tomshark, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Hey guys, thanks for sticking it to the end. If you enjoyed this video, then leave a like, and if you really enjoyed this and want to stay updated on my future content, then subscribe. You can watch 2 of my previous videos on the left, and I hope you guys stick around for the next one. Thanks for all the support, and I'm outta here.